we also spent a lot of time with Papa in preparation. We actually lived down at Snug Harbor and Sand Island for a few months. We weren't supposed to live there, but it just turned out that way. So we lived in 2 massive containers. We slept on the sails and the ropes, and we had a portable bathroom that never got attended to, and a garden hose, and that's how we lived from January to April, to the end of April, until the canoe took off on May 1st. And what was supposed to be our training time was spent putting Hokulea back together again, because Hokulea got swamped on its last leg coming back from Kauai, and everything came undone. So when we arrived on Oahu for our final crew training, Hokulea was all apart. It's 2 single hulls on big barrels on the land. So we spent all of our time putting Hokulea back together again, which meant we had to go to Manawili, get new hull, and we had to get new bamboo for the decks, and we had to do all the lashing again. And so we spent our days doing that, and our evenings. We were fortunate enough to have Papa with us, and he started teaching us about the stars. I was supposed to do a little bit of navigation tonight. I'm probably the worst person to do navigation, because I even got us lost on land in Tahiti. But we did end up at a really good wedding party, so it paid off. But I do know some things, and I do know that there are 4 main star lines that the navigator uses. And actually Mahinaho knows way more navigation than I do, and he can pick out the stars like that. I have to think about it. I would say, on a night, we're also on the sail plan B, because sail plan A for tonight was to go outside and look at stars. When I realized there weren't going to be any, I ran and got my slides. So I remember the year 2000, I think it was, they sailed back from Tahiti. It's probably one of the worst trips that I can remember anybody talking about. They were without stars almost every single night, and the canoe got battered, just got battered. And then just right before Molokai, I think they broke a mast or something, but I asked one of the girls how it was, and she said that they were without stars almost every night, and it was wet all the way. So what do you do with no stars? So tonight, if you were on the canoe, what would you do? So I'm sure that the navigator would have tried to get a glimpse of the setting sun. So now you know exactly where west is. If you know where west is, you know where east is, and then you can find north and south, even if you don't have stars. So guarantee he's going to make use of maybe, even if you can't see the exact sunset, the light that comes from that side, there's more light than around anywhere else. That must be where the sun is setting. You're definitely going to make use of that. You also make use of sunrises before it gets too high, so you can get a dead east. So probably would use that. And if you were Papa Mao, you probably get into the hull and feel the swells. Or like Mahina mentioned earlier, maybe look for the reflection on the water to see how the swells are rolling. And also, if you're going in the right direction before all the stars disappeared, and your canoe is pitching, if you started rolling later on, you probably know you changed direction, right? Because you were supposed to be pitching, not rolling. So you take all of those things into account, and I'm sure there are other things too that can help you when the stars are gone. But those are just some of the simple things that I've come to understand. So everybody knows Polynesian Voyaging Society. It was created after Hokulea was created. Actually, it's created before, when they had the idea of building this canoe. So the canoe was built because of this guy called Ben Finney. There's also the Austronesian language that connects all of us, and then there's I know Marshall Weiser did a whole study in the ads, right? And he found ads similar throughout Polynesia, so that we know that we all came from the same place, that we're all connected. And so through the archaeological evidence, and also through the study of the old Molelo and Oli and oral history that was left behind, he said, he figured out where we came from, and so he figured out that we must have come down from Southeast Asia into the Polynesias, and that Hawaii was the last place to be settled. This is as far north as it came, but it was all done on purpose. all done on purpose, that they built vessels that could sail those large distances, that they had knowledge of the stars and the natural elements to guide them, that they could prepare food, water, plants, take animals with them, all the stuff that they needed to settle into a new place. So he set out to prove this, and he did some experimental sailing on the smaller vessel, and then finally he had exhausted all of his research and said, you know what, we just got to build a canoe and do it. So this is a Herb Kane drawing of what Herb thought the canoes might have looked like at that time. And also, you know, we only built one canoe, but we understand from his research and stuff that there were many canoes that came all at once, not just one. You know, because some of them didn't make it. Some of them might have swamped, as Hokulea did. Some of them might have fallen apart, we don't know. But it wasn't just one canoe. We could only afford to build one canoe. So we know that the Polynesians, the first settlers that came here, brought the plants and animals that they needed because they didn't know what was here. We know that they brought at least 22 different kinds of plants. They brought with them taro, you know, tea leaf, mai'a, ulu, uala, probably noni, kukui. They also brought with them animals. And then we know that they were able to use the elements that were available to them, the natural elements, and find their way on purpose. So this is Papa Mao in the Plumeria Lei, and he's demonstrating his navigator's circle, the star compass. This is what he looked like when we first met him. You know, I don't know how old he was. I just never ever knew how old he was. He's timeless. Maybe, I don't know, in his 30s, I don't know how old he was. But here he is in the early days. So in order to do this voyage, first we needed a canoe. And they went to look for logs because our canoes were built of logs. And we learned one of our first lessons. When they went to look for the logs to build a canoe, the logs that were healthy enough weren't large enough, and the logs that were large enough weren't healthy enough. And so we learned that we were not taking care of our native resources. The koa trees were getting diseased and used up. And so we learned that first lesson. And since then, we have done a lot of reforestation and have paid more attention to the things that infect our native plants. So we had to build Hokulea of wood and fiberglass because we didn't have our native woods to build it with. But she's built true to design. So we would then test the design of the canoe. We also needed a navigator, and when we looked throughout Hawaii, there was no one with this kind of knowledge because the need for these kinds of navigators had disappeared, along with the voyaging canoes. And when you don't practice those skills anymore, you just lose the ability to do it. But in Micronesia, they still do it a lot, and they have many navigators. But we also, before we went to Micronesia, we also went throughout Polynesia because we are Polynesian. And we found one navigator that was left, but he died before the project. So we went further into our roots, Micronesia, where many navigators exist. And Maupialug, this man right here, agreed to help us, much to the dismay of his fellow navigators, who did not want him to take that knowledge out of their circle. It was meant, you know, the other navigators said, this is our knowledge, this is meant for us. What are you doing, taking it outside of our culture? And he said, do you see anybody here wanting to learn this? All of our young people now, they want to go Saipan, they want to go disco, they want to drive car, they want to go Western college. They don't want to learn this cultural knowledge. But he said, here are the ones knocking at our door. They want us, they want our help, and they want to learn. So he said, I'm going to teach them, and then when we forget, like they did, they can come back and teach us. So he was looking at the big picture, and he was really investing in their future. And even though all the neighboring islands and all the other navigators, they shunned him, he was not popular for doing this. And it would take many, many more years before the healing began and the forgiveness happened. It did eventually happen, but it did not happen right away. So, so we had our canoe, we had our navigator, and then we needed to, we had to learn about the sails. How did they make the sails? So we had people, lahala makers, making lahala sails. We had what kind of plants did they take, and we had this whole what kind of animals. We had this whole army of people as we were preparing the canoe itself. We had this whole army of people behind the scenes doing all the research and doing all the other preparations that needed to be done. This is just one of the few navigational tools that they use. This is one of the birds that they look for. So there are certain birds that go out to sea but will go back. They'll go out to get food and then they'll go back to land. And then there's other birds like the moli, the albatross, that stay out for 7 years. You don't want to follow that one. So, and then this is the setting sun, I think. And so, as I mentioned before, this is one of the tools that they use for navigation. Here we go. So you get a dead west. And then again, the swells, the movement of the swells in the ocean. Slightly out of order, the carousel fell, and so I quickly put them back in, but that's okay. So this is, so now we had everything in place, and as you can see, just on these few slides I showed you, there was a lot of research to do. And not only what kind of plants did they take, but how did they package those plants so that they could be carried on a voyaging canoe and last for 35 days. Did they wrap them up in moss and then coconut fiber? Did they take seeds? Did they take the huli? If you took the huli, did you air it out or did you wrap it up? Or so many things to learn. And then the foods, like we dried the foods, but how do you keep mold off the dried foods? And the pa'iai, is there a special way to package it so that doesn't spoil? Or just everything. And if you take the animals, like where do you keep them on the canoe? And of course, we only took one each, but they couldn't take one each, right? Pointless. We know they had to take more than one each. So how did they do it? Where did they keep it? This is a launching in 1975 at Kualoa, which is deemed to be one of the most sacred places on Oahu. We all just think of it as a nice little beach park where tourists go. But it really is one of the most sacred places on Oahu, and there's a lot of Pele-related stories that happen here. I think some of the stories, right? Maile is the one where Pele's sister goes to get lohiau. Doesn't she go through here? And there's, yeah, yes. So there's a lot of stories related to this area, and it's very sacred. So they chose this place to launch the canoe. So this is what Hokulea looked like in 1976, in 75 actually. And this is the blessing. And all along the way, there's controversy. What about the blessing? How many black pigs do we kill? Do we kill any black pigs? What kind of chants do we do? Who does the chanting? How much tea leaf do we use? Should there be tea leaf? Like this canoe hadn't been around for 200 years, and nobody really knew the correct protocol, how it should be done. We were learning. It was a good learning process. So it woke us up, made us maka'ala, pay attention. So after the canoe was launched, it went to every island, tried to go to all the main Hawaiian islands to introduce Hokulea to the people of Hawaii, because really it was their canoe. It still is your canoe. And they wanted the people to come and see it, to touch it, to lend their mana to the canoe, and to hopefully pick up potential crew members. So they sailed from island to island, and during this time too, they were also learning how to sail, because we had not done this in over 200 years. So here are some of the guys. Duki Kuahulu in the blue shorts. He's gone now. He was on the first voyage. Billy Richards in the middle. He's right now sailing to Africa, I guess. And Roger Ka'avaloa on the right. He's also gone. But Duki Kuahulu is really interesting. He's a Waikiki beach boy all his life, and his kuleana was steering. And so when he came to Hokulea, with a lot of steering knowledge. And during the 76th voyage, we always had trouble with the steering blades. You know, it used to flip people right off the canoe. It took a lot of guys to handle it all at once. We're still trying to figure out the correct design for these steering blades. So on the way to Tahiti, Dookie, was observing. He had them pull the steering blade out, and he reshaped it, and then it worked perfect. And you could have one person. I could steer it by myself. Later on, about 10 years after this voyage, there was a archaeological dig at Huahine, and they found a sailing canoe that had been prepared for a voyage, and the steering paddles were on the canoe, and they were almost exactly to the design that Dookie had done. So na'au na'awau, yeah. And then that was his purpose, and I really feel that as the canoe sailed through the islands and found us, it was, and I believe that Hokulea found us, we didn't find her, that we all had a purpose, and whether we realized it immediately or later on, we all had a purpose for being there. That was Dookie's purpose. He was the steering person. That was his kuleana. And Billy today is a captain, and he works with the Friends of Hawaii Loa and the 4 canoes, and he has been involved with all the canoes for the last, next year will be 40 years. So this is Hokulea. After we put it all back together again and put her back in the water, so you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yakus that connected 2 hulls. Each yaku took about 8 hours and two crew persons to lash. And then we had to lash all the decks, all the rails. We had to go get new rails in Manawili in the Hau Forest. It was a lot of work. So this is our home away from home. It's one of the Matson containers where we lived at Snug Harbor. We're never meant to stay there. They're going to bring us in January. They introduce all the crew to each other. So what the canoe did was sail through all the islands in 75, and then they got names, and then they had a big meeting, a crew nomination meeting, and the idea of women came up, and there was only actually one woman that they had considered, and she was from Kauai, Keawanui. And they weren't going to take women because they only had one woman. And so Kimo Hugo said, no, we have 2. There's another woman on Molokai, and she'll go. Thank you, Jesus. That was me. I'm so grateful, And I got to tell you now, Hokulea is the first sailboat I ever been on in my entire life. And I had no idea how to sail. But I figured I could listen to what my tutu said. Just shut up, open your eye, open your ears, and you can learn anything, right? So that's pretty much what I did. And just counted my blessings that I could go. And also, not just for myself, but to represent my ohana and my aina, Molokai Nui Ahina. I was so proud that Molokai was there. So they brought us in 1975. We all met each other, and then we were supposed to come down on weekends and go on training sails. And then actually they were going to make the final cut. It wasn't the final cut yet, so we still had to prove our worth. But Hokulea had swamped on the way back from Kauai. That was the last island it went to. And it got towed back to Oahu by the sea flight, and all the rigging came apart. The whole canoe just came apart. And so when we met Hokulea again, it was all apart. And so then it became our kuleana to prepare the canoe for the voyage, which took up all of our training time. And so in the end, everybody that has shown a commitment to this was considered crew. And they took all of us in the end. So we started going on weekends, and then we realized the weekends weren't enough. So then we started going on Thursday and coming back on Monday. We started going on Wednesday, coming back on Tuesday. Going on Tuesday, coming back on Monday. And then we said, you know what, we just got to stay here. We got to live here, and we got to go malama this canoe and make sure everything's good. And we can't do it just on a weekend. So we quit our jobs, and we left our families, and we moved into these 2 containers that never meant for us to live in. And we stayed there and saw it through. Nobody had money. I can remember the guys, David Lyman he was working down at the harbor. He got some saba from the Japanese sailors and brought it down, and we fried it up, cook on pot rice, or everybody would dollar go buy a 5-pound box chicken, make sure you eat chicken. Or some of the families would come down and bring food, but nobody had money. And we never really knew where our next meal was coming from. But it happened. So we stayed there from January to the end of April. This is our motley crew. And the site is bus up, but I love it. Because it's pretty much how it was. It was all bus up. And that little dog in the front, that's Hokulea. So they wanted to take a true poi dog, but there weren't any true poi dogs. And so the Honolulu Zoo had bred a dog that they thought came the closest to a poi dog, the kind that our ancestors would have brought with them. Short, broad back, short pointy ears. They had a yip instead of a bark. And so her name became Hokulea. And she came down to live with us to get used to us. And she hated sailing. She didn't like being on the water. Too bad. So here's just life down there. That's me on the back of the red truck 200 pounds ago. And that's National Geographic. They gave a lot of money for the documentary rights. And so they were in our face every day as we made ready. One of our very important meetings, a lot of meetings, plenty meetings. This is Billy Richards and Shorty Bertleman as we worked on the canoe. Two really intense guys, actually. So I told you what Billy does, and Shorty became the captain and the navigator for the Big Island from Makali'i. And Shorty Bertleman is as good as Lionel Thompson. He just doesn't get any attention because he doesn't want it, and he lays low. But he learned a lot from Mao on that 76 voyage to Tahiti. And then I know I had to bring Mao back to Hawaii to learn from him, but Shorty got to learn actually on the voyage. But Shorty, he's a very humble and quiet man, but he's captain and navigator on the Big Island. So this is us preparing. This is what the canoe looked like back in the day. We didn't have any canvas or anything on the rails. It's all open rail. And you can see it's 2x4 and bamboo, so water would come up through the deck. There was about a foot of space on either side of the deck between the inside gunnel and the deck, so water would come up on the side. Pretty rustic. You can see a good shot of the deck here. It wasn't waterproof at all. So after January, February, March, April, 4 months, the end of April, the canoe was deemed ready, and although some people might not have agreed, that was the time that they chose. And so back in the day, we were on a schedule because money and politics, and so if they picked a day out of the air and said that's the day we're going, that's the day they're going, even though a tornado was coming or there was no wind, whatever, that's the day we were going. We had to stay to schedule. So we had to be ready by then. We went to Honolulu Bay. We were towed to Honolulu Bay because they never have wind from Honolulu. And we stayed there and did the rest of the preparation. We gathered some more food for the voyage, bananas, and loaded up some other supplies, water and things like that. So this is a mo'olelo, and it was built actually before Hokulea. It's a double sailing canoe, a smaller version, one sail, one mast, and they use it a lot for training, and they still use it for training actually. So although Hokulea is a Hawaiian sailing canoe, we still had to sign Western waivers for liability and protection. So John signing his waiver on Keanui's back. Keaunui was the other woman that sailed with me. This is our Ava ceremony at Honolulu Bay. And at this Ava ceremony, Mao Piainu asked us if we could leave all of our issues on the land, that those issues that we had belonged on the land. And we had plenty issues. So many things are going on as we were preparing the canoe. The movement for Kaho'olawe had begun, and the Kaho'olawe Ohana came to our site and asked if we'd take the canoe to Kaho'olawe, and we wanted to. And for me, it was really difficult because all the meetings for Kaho'olawe were held here on Molokai, and I had been involved with that before I went to Hokulea, and I wanted to take the canoe. But the feds told us if we took the canoe to Kaho'olawe, they would confiscate the canoe, and that would be the end of the project. So we didn't. But Walter always reminds me that I don't know if they would take them because we never go. So we gotta live with that, right? We didn't go, and we gotta live with that. And Walter might have been right. Maybe they wouldn't have done it, but we'll never know because we never go. So that was just one thing. And then we had other issues. We had the Hawaiian people coming down and saying, how many Hawaiians are you gonna have on this trip, and how Hawaiian are you gonna do this? It's a Hawaiian canoe. You gotta keep it Hawaiian. And so people were coming out all the time and telling us how it should be done and what they wanted to happen. And we felt obligated to hear everybody out and to try to answer to everyone. And it got really difficult and a lot of controversy. You see the guy in a denim shirt on the right-hand side, Kimo Hugo. He just wrote a book called Ohanawa'a. If you guys can get a hold of it, you should read it because it's a tell-all. And he was pegged as an activist and a troublemaker when in fact his whole issue is safety. And so he never did go, but he was probably responsible for all of us that were there. So we owe, I have a lot of gratitude to Kimo. But yes, he didn't go. So Mao realized that there was all of this internal stuff going on, and he knew that we had a lot of issues. It was very controversial. And so he said, you know what, today we're going, and you leave all of this on the land, all this land stuff going to stay on the land. Today we're going to the ocean. We are brothers and sisters. We are all one. Our lives depend on each other. You have to get along. And if you have issue, you bring it to me, and I will deal with it. So they went with, the prepared foods, the dried foods, the pa'iai, the whole foods like coconuts and bananas. And then they had all the plants, and they had their navigator, they had their canoe, and the animals. They had the pigs, they had the dog, and this is the pig and the chicken. The chicken didn't have a name, but they named the pig Maxwell. You know that song, Maxwell Namu Namu? That's Maxwell. And the chicken was no Nami. So all the animals actually made it safely, and the pig actually got really fat and ate his cage and everything else that he could eat. And the chicken was almost bald because Mao discovered that he could make really good lures out of some of the feathers. And they did catch more fish than we did, so maybe that's a secret. But they all survived. The pig was sunburned because he ate the canvas on his cage. So this is Edward Keawanui. He's really unique. He was raised by his grandfather on the Big Island in Hawaiian religion, and he still went to the heiau until the day he died every day to do his prayers. But he also went to Western school to learn theology and the Western style of religion. And he actually had a little Protestant church in Wailua on Oahu, which we attended while I lived there. And he was recognized as one of Hawaii's living treasures. So he was the kahu for the canoe in 1976. And that's him in the fatigue jacket blessing Kavika Kapuhulehua, who was the captain at that time. And he was the only one to make the round trip. And Kavika originally is from Niihau and spoke fluent Hawaiian. He was only one of two people in 1976 that spoke fluent Hawaiian on the canoe. Now you go on the canoe, almost every crew member, right, Manina, speaks Hawaiian. You could have a whole crew that only speaks Hawaiian during the voyage. But in 1976, we had Kavika on the first crew and Makala on the second crew. They were the only two that could speak fluent Hawaiian. So we've just come a long way. That amazes me. But Kavika spoke in the Niihau style, and so when he went to Tahiti, he had, well, even Maka'ala, they had no problem conversing with the Tahitian people in their language. So here they go. There's Molokai in the background. So they had 17 people on board. The sound man and the cinematographer from National Geographic, and the rest are regular crew members. Well, they also had David Lewis from New Zealand, who was, he did some celestial navigating in New Zealand, and he wanted to observe Mao's technique. And then you had Rhoda Williams, who was from Tahiti, who's a navigator as well. And he was there to help Mao if Mao needed help when they reached the Tuamotus. So the Tuamotus are these little atolls that sometimes get completely underwater, and it's hard to maneuver through that. And so they had Rodo on there to help Mao if he needed it. So you had Mao, Rodo, and David Lewis, And then you had the two National Geographic guys. And then you had Ben Finney, right? He founded the whole project. And then Tommy Holmes, so he was on there too. So Ben Finney, Tommy Holmes, and Herb Kane were the three people that founded the Polynesian Voyaging Society. Tommy Holmes has a really good book called The Hawaiian Canoe, if you guys are interested in that. And then, of course, you know Herb Kane, the famous painter, but also a scholar of Hawaiian history. And he recently passed away. So they were the three people that founded the Voyaging Society. So Ben and Tommy were actually on the canoe as well. And then you had the rest of us that became known as the undesirables. Long story. So way on the right in the baseball cap is Sam Kalalau. He's from Hana, and he was our kupuna. I think he was probably in his 50s at the time, and I thought, whoa, Sam is like really old. And now that I'm 63, I go, oh, he wasn't that old, yeah? Then. But at the time, I thought he was really old to be sailing, and he was awesome. He was a cowboy fisherman from Hana, you know, hard worker, really good morals, really good values, and hardcore guy. And he loved all of us, and we knew that he loved us. And then Rhoda with the striped shirt, and then Mom with the white t-shirt, and then David. It's so funny because the guys, you know, the guys would say that Rhoda and David, they would try to like tell Mao stuff, and then Mao would just like listen and go, okay, okay, and then he would do exactly what he thought he should do and stick to his decision making. But he would say okay to them. This is John Cruz, not the singer, but he is Kepa Cruz's dad, if you guys know Kepa Cruz. So John was in charge of all the plants, just making sure that the plants didn't go bad and they needed to be watered and stuff. So that's what he's doing. But if you look at Hokulea, they were so crowded, 17 people. And then they had all the plants, and then the tree animals, and they had the photography equipment, and the food, the prepared foods, the dried foods, and it was really crowded. And two masts now, and two sails with the old style crab claws, so with the boom that stuck out way out on the deck and swung around every time you worked it, unlike the sails that they have now with the triangle. Or are they sailing crab claw again?
Mostly crab claws.
Mostly crab claw. Yeah, it is more efficient. They actually tested it in a wind tunnel.
You can only get triangles and Hoku crab claws.
And Hoku runs away.
Runs away.
Yeah, because we would run away from our escort boat, which is a modern Western style sailboat, and then they would have to crank up their engines. So this is Buffalo Keawanui in the front and Sam Kalalau in the back with Boogie Kalama. So both Sam and Boogie are gone. Buffalo is still with us. And then that's the Wahine Ki'i in the back. So the Wahine Ki'i has eyes, and she was there to witness the voyage. The Kane Ki'i is on the other side. You can't see him. He doesn't have eyes, and he's holding up this big round shell. And he was there to take the burden of the canoe, to carry the burden. And they were carved out by Sam Ka'ai from Maui. So this is pretty much what the crew looked like. Life on board looks like a pretty intense hookah session here. I think they caught a fish here. Fishing was, we hand lined, and it was really fun to catch fish because it would break the monotony of the day, and then it would offer us fresh food. So we ate it raw, of course, and then if there was any meat left, we dried it. We made soup with all the bones. So we pretty much used the whole fish. Didn't waste anything. So their voyage took 35 days. And they left from Honolulu Bay, which probably is like one of the worst places to leave from, and they went around the north side. And they got into 5 days of big swells, really harsh weather, high seas, rain, before they cleared Hawaii. You know, there's a place at Kaho'olawe called Kealei Kahiki, which literally translates into the way to Kahiki. So perhaps, maybe just perhaps we should have gone that way. But because of all the controversy, we went the other way and got all bus up before, just 5 days into the voyage. And now we know better. So it took them 35 days. And then also after they finally cleared all that harsh weather and got going, it was learned that the person that prepared the foods at the farewell ceremony had hepatitis. And so they had to air vac inoculation to the canoe, and everybody had to be inoculated. And so did we on land. So they got delayed again, and then they got into the doldrums, which is a condition that occurs near the equator, and where you have no wind, no current, it's overcast. I saw a picture of the canoe completely reflected in the water, and they went nowhere. For 7 days and 7 nights, they went absolutely nowhere. And then they finally, modern sailboats, they'll just motor out of that until they get to some wind and go, but this is not a modern sailboat, so they had to just stay there. And Mao said, this is good. You rest, you reflect, meditate, take some time out. This is good. But for modern sailors that are used to getting to point A from point A to point B in a hurry, patience was one of the hardest values for them to have practiced. They had a hard time with that. They just wanted to go. So that's probably the hardest part for them in the whole voyage, to just be like that. And, Mao said, hey, enjoy it. So they got to Tahiti finally after 35 days. This is their first landing. It's a little atoll in the Tahitian chain of islands. This is Mataiva. And although they didn't know Tahiti was, Hokulea was coming, they greeted them, open arms, they made speeches, they exchanged gifts. They loaded everybody up on a truck and gave them the grand tour of their 1 mile island, and then had a big tamara or luau for them that night. And then the next day they set sail for Papeete, where we were waiting. There's Hoku. I hate sailing. So we flew over to Tahiti to meet them 4 days before the canoe came in. And in those days, I don't know if it's still like that, there's only one flight to Tahiti. It was on a Monday night. And it happened to be Memorial Day. And they called Molokai and said, if you want to be there when the canoe comes in, you have to get to Honolulu today. So you can go tonight. No ATM, all my money in the bank, and all the flights are booked, and I don't know who got bumped off for me to go. But I managed to get to Oahu, and mahalo to my ohana that scraped all their money together and sent me off with some little kenny in my pocket so I could go and be there when the canoe came in. So we flew to Papeete and stayed there for 4 days, and the canoe came in. So it's really cool. When we got there, already people were wearing Hokulea t-shirts. They had a song contest. Over 100 songs had already been written about Hokulea. And they were excited. They were very excited. This is Papeete. When I ask the kids where this is, they go, Kona, Lahaina. But this is Papeete. And I showed this to this young Tahitian guy that came over a few years ago. And he said, where is this? I said, Papeete. He goes, no, too many trees. So I guess it's not like that anymore. This is not the greeting, but when the canoe came in, we went down to the bay early in the morning, just a few people on the beach. And then I realized that I was getting pushed further and further into the water, and then I was standing in the water up to my waist. And when I turned around and looked at the whole bay in Papeete, every space was taken. It was estimated about 17,000 people there. A gathering of Native people, the largest gathering of Native people for a single event in modern history. And the canoe came around the bend, and you can't mistake it for anything else. Nothing else looks like it. And so from far away, they already knew it was Hokulea. And they put their hands up in the air, and they cried, they were wailing, and they were waving the canoe in, and they were saying, welcome home. Welcome to our family. What took you so long? We've been waiting for you for over 200 years. So needless to say, it was a very emotional moment. And you realize that at least a part of who you are is from here. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to go home and see where you're from and to have that experience and to know that people would still welcome you home after 200 years with open arms and with pride. So while we were there, we went to many, we couldn't even attend everything that we were invited to. Every little village wanted the canoe there, every association. But we went to this place here called Tapu Tapu Atea. And I think in Wailua, there's a place called Tapu Tapu Atea on Molokai. But this place is called Tapu Tapu Atea, and it was believed that this is a place where there's a period of time when there were many canoes going back and forth between Hawaii and Tahiti, and they think this is where the canoes are going. They're going back to Tahiti for religious purposes. And Tapu Tapuatea was so sacred that they would roll the canoes up onto the land over bodies. This is a luakini. This is a sacrificial heiau. And it's a very powerful place. And the Tahitian people wanted us to take the canoe there. And then later on, after we sailed, in the 80s, they went back to do some healing at this place. There was some truss that was broken. And later on, and it happened here. And so later on, they went back and fixed that. But we didn't break the truss. It was like ancient times. And it had to do with sailing canoes. And so later on, they went back and fixed it. But we went to this place, and we had Hokulea outside in the shallow water, and we walked in, and we were instructed to pick up a pohaku as they walked in. And then they took it from us, and they called out our names, and they placed it there. And they said that people wouldn't forget that it was us that brought the canoe back finally to Tahiti, and our stones would remain there forever. So it's a nice feeling to know that those stones are there, and our names are like in that stone. So we stayed there for a month, and during that month we hauled Hokulea out, dried out. There's very little damage done to the canoe, spidery cracks on the side where the steering paddle pressed against the hull. But other than that, hardly anything. We took it out, we cleaned it all out, cleaned up the insides, and then restocked it. And because all of the experiments were done on the way over, our mission was simply to get Hokulea home. And so we had bottled water, canned food, and we also had a lot of fresh food, and we also did catch fish on the way home. And then again, we had our modern navigator, who was Kimo Lyman. He's an awesome guy, and he's still sailing. Yeah? He was just on the last leg. Yeah. He's just an awesome, he's a really good person, just really good person. So that's Kimo in the yellow t-shirt, and then his brother was David Lyman in 1978 when Eddie got lost. Puting. It's sad for that family to have that happen. Both families. And then in the middle is Gordon P. Anaya, who is now known as Papa P. Anaya and still sails. And then on the left is Kavika Kapahulehua, who we have lost just in the last, I think, 3 years or so, maybe more than that. This is the morning of our departure from Tahiti. There would be 13 of us, 2 women and 11 men. And Hoku would go back with us because she belonged to the Honolulu Zoo. The pig and the chicken were living happily ever after in Papeete. Almost all of the plants survived the trip and were planted in Papeete. And some of the food spoiled, but not all of it. And one of the things that Mal told us before we left was, he said, you guys should practice eating spoiled food, because sometimes the food gets spoiled and sometimes that's the only food you have. So he was telling us you should practice eating it, because if you're not ma'a, you get sick, right? And that's what happened to some of the food. It did get spoiled. But for the most part, most of the experiments were successful. The navigation was a huge success. They plotted with modern tools the route that they thought he should take, and then they followed his route and put it up against the route that they plotted. It was almost exact. And he did not need help getting through the Tuamotus. He was just fine. So Rhoda was along for the ride. And so the navigation was successful. The canoe found out could surf really well and handle really well in the water. The foods, like I said, some of it spoiled, and all the animals lived, and most of the plants lived. So all in all, it was a pretty successful voyage. So all we had to do is take the canoe home. So here we are. And this is a farewell. The guy in the blue t-shirt is Leonardo di Puputawiki, and he would be the only Tahitian to sail home with us and return to Tahiti as a celebrity pretty much for the rest of his life. But we just called him Lele because it was too hard to say Leonardo di Puputawiki every time. Yeah, Ninja Turtle. He was like a little Ninja Turtle. There's Aunty Penny crying. We're all crying. Nobody wanted to leave. One wanted to Tahiti. I could stay there forever. Nobody wanted to leave. Even Hoku didn't want to leave. Hoku, we found out. At some point in our whole month there, somebody asked, where's Hoku? And we found out that she was living with a family in Tahiti, and they were feeding her steak and ice cream, and she was sleeping in their bed. And so when it was time to go, she didn't want to come home. And as we were leaving Papeete, she leaped. I didn't even know she could jump that far. She leaped off the canoe and started frantically swimming back towards Papeete, which is probably what we all wanted to do, but she actually did it. And I had to dive in after her and get her. Like 5 minutes into the voyage, we were both soaking wet and it was never dry again. She gave me stink eye the whole time, and I was pissed off at her for jumping off. So, but when we got back to Oahu, we felt really sorry for her because she's kind of cute, you know. And we felt really sorry for her, so we asked the governor to waive the quarantine, and then we asked the Honolulu Zoo if they could give her up, and we sent her back to Tahiti to live with her family, happily ever after. I'm sure there's all her ancestors running around Papeete. Wally Forsythe is in the white, in the blue shirt, and on the 17th of this month, they're going to have a big memorial for him and his wife who just recently passed. And Wally is a well-known for his surfing and for the, and also he helped build Hokulea. He was one of the pioneers in modern surfing in Hawaii. And he helped build Hokulea, and he was just, he did so many things. It's hard to say all the things that he did. But he and his wife would be remembered on the 17th. They started Waikiki Surf Club, and he built the canoe, the tutu, which we have often used at state races. So we just lost him as well. And he didn't get to sail on any of the voyages, but he did so much for the voyages. He's one of those guys that did a lot of work and didn't need to go, you know. Nainoa Thompson, when he was just a kid, we actually called him the kid. So this is his first voyage, 1976. And after this voyage, he realized his purpose. He wanted to be a navigator. And he went back and talked Maupialug into coming back and teaching him. This is Hokulea Stink Eye. Yeah, I know. And see the deck, the bamboo and the lashing. It's so hard to walk on this deck. And when your feet are wet all the time, your feet get sore. And then the water would constantly come up through this deck. You're always wet. Our voyage took 21 days. And we had 2 watches, 6 people on each watch. And the captain just kind of floated between the 2 crews. And so our duties, while his was to navigate, our other duties were to check the lines, and we took turns. If you were on watch, we took 4-hour shifts, 4 on, 4 off, 6 on each watch. And if you were on duty, you had to be at the steering paddle for half an hour. Everybody had to steer. And when you were not steering, you were watching out for each other, checking lines, trying to keep each other awake, that kind of thing, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning. So this is Keawanui getting a position on the navigation. Gordon Kianaya, Papa looks so young, and Snake Ahi from Maui. Snake was awesome. Talk about good steersman. He's like the baby cookie. And he is just a natural on a canoe. I think he has done every single voyage on Hokulea from Tahiti in the last 39 years. And he's still sailing. Keawanui again. This is how we steered the canoe after Duki fixed it. Just took one person, just steered it from the side. We use a side paddle. That's Maka'ala's hale in the background. We teased him about building that hale, and then we all like acted nice to him so we could go in there and get out of the sun. So Maka'ala Yates demonstrating how to eat kraka and popo in a hurricane. His hair is really curly, yeah. So you see how strong the wind is. It's getting straight his hair. And so we only had that one propane can that you see there. We had that can, and we had one burner, and we cooked right on the deck like that. And so the water would come up from the deck and come over the side and stuff. And if you're cooking, you just leaned over the pot and the fire so the wave wouldn't hit that, it would hit you. And yeah, so everything was done in one pot. It was a one pot cooking. But Makala is incredible. He's a engineering student at the UH at the time. He spoke Hawaiian fluently. And then after we did our voyage, he went back to Tahiti. He was some kind of tennis pro at the hotel. And then he came back, he studied under Margaret Machado and learned Hawaiian Lomi Lomi. And then went to Arizona and became a chiropractor. And now he has healing clinics around the United States and in Italy and Canada and all over the world. And he does like natural healing. I know. And we thought he was just a silly guy from the Big Island. So this is where we fish. Yeah, we hand line in the back, and it's like I said, it provided us with a lot of entertainment and good food. It was really exciting when we hooked up. We didn't catch as many fish as maiden did. We didn't have maiden, we didn't have a chicken. This is one of the fish that we caught. And then this is like the one meal that we'd eat together would be dinner. It was a time when the whole crew came together and we shared stories, music. Pretty much we think what our ancestors would have done, you know. And then we went off in the evening time to the second watch went to sleep and we stood our watches and then same routine every day. And during the day, most of the time we're awake. We had open rails, but we had these bunks built over the halls where we could rest if the weather was nice. So we actually sometimes slept in here at night. Maka was trying to show me how to use his camera. I'm like, what? I don't want to do it. Melkini was our youngest. He's our baby. And we recently lost him. But he was one of the few guys that have been invited to the area called Big Board. You know the one that happens or doesn't happen every year? He has been invited several times to that. He's a good surfer. Ben Young, he was our doctor. He's a medical doctor, but he's also a psychiatrist. He's always trying to figure us out. Like he would come and ask us, so what do you think? And we would just like make up stuff for him to entertain him. So you can see it would get really rough out there. And I think this particular time, the escort boat came to us for the first time to talk to us. And there was a big, big storm coming, and we were right in its path. And they were really afraid for us. So they actually broke the code of silence and came to us to tell us so we could prepare. So we're tying everything that we can tie down and getting ready for this big storm. And it did come, but it veered slightly away from us right before it got to us. And it just provided us with the most wind we had during the whole voyage and the biggest surf we ever had. So we found out how fast Hoku could go and how well it could surf. It was incredible. This is Kainoa Lee, he's wearing a malu, and he was the only one that didn't get chafing. The guys that wore their board shorts had all rash and by you know where. And so, but he was the only one that didn't. So much for our ancestors. They knew what to do, right? So the guys that wear board shorts, every once in a while had to take off their clothes and go air out their rash, which is what this guy is doing. This is where we bathed in front of the canoe. There was this net that was between the two manu in the front. So we had a bucket tied to the rail. We threw the bucket over, scooped up water, rinsed off, soaked up with sea soap, and then rinsed off. And that's where we bathed. Because fresh water was only for drinking. This is Snake actually trying to get a freshwater bath. He has rinsed off with salt water and soaked up, and he's waiting for that squall to come, but I don't think it came. I think he's standing there with dry soap. That's why he's laughing. But he's naked over there waiting for that squall to come. This is where we slept. During the trip to Tahiti, they took all the side thatching. They took it all down because it got soaking wet and heavy and it wasn't functional, it wasn't efficient. And they built this little hale out of the material in the middle of the deck between the two masts. And so it's a double decker, 4 people on the top, 4 people on the bottom, and you had just enough room to kind of just crawl in there and lay down and go to sleep. And that was our only shelter on the canoe. So, like I said, our voyage was 21 days. I think that's the record for now, from Papaete to Hawaii. And the first thing you see are, of course, the tall mountains on the Big Island. We woke up one morning and the clouds looked different and everything just felt different. And we're like, wow, we're all standing there like, wow, can this be it? Are we home? And then as we got closer, the mountains got bigger and we realized, yes, this is home. And then you realize that you're standing in your ancestors' footsteps and now looking through their eyes. And you've probably seen Hawaii the way they saw it for the first time. And it was more beautiful than I even remembered it. And yeah, we just, you just cry. You cry. And so we sailed the whole backside of the Big Island and Maui, and we spent the rest of our days sailing the whole backside of Molokai. And I couldn't have been more proud. And they were like, wow, your island is so beautiful. I was like, right? It's so beautiful. So we sailed all the way to Kalaupapa, and it was evening, and the escort boat came to us for the second time and said, look, Honolulu called and said, you guys are too early. You cannot come into Honolulu today. They scheduled everything for tomorrow. So what do you want us to do? They said, just hang out. Okay, so we're going to hang out in Kalaupapa. So we pulled in and dropped anchor, and then they told us we couldn't get off because they couldn't get a custom agent to us to clear us, and we had just come from a foreign country. But the people of Kalaupapa could come on, and so they did. They came on board with their beverages and their food and their music and so much aloha, and they cried when they came on board, and they thanked us for bringing Hokulea to them in a place where they're usually forgotten and passed by, that we brought the canoe to them. And they said that, as the rest of the people in Hawaii, they've been watching the voyage and hoped to get a glimpse of us as we went by, and that we brought the canoe and stopped there and let them come on board. They were just so grateful. They stayed like all night with us and partied and kept on crying and thanking us. And so we formed a friendship that continues today, and Hokulea tries to go back as often as it can to Kalaupapa for visits. So this is a boat coming from Molokai, actually, greeting us as we're approaching Oahu. And of course, it was a lovely reception at Magic Island. Lots of speeches, lots of people, airplanes flying over, doing air acrobatics, dropping flowers. Anything that could float was out there. Surfboards, boogie boards, boats, canoes, whatever, everything. And if you had asked me that day what I thought would happen, I would say, well, we did everything we're supposed to do, and for the most part, we were successful. And I thought Hokulea would just then become a floating museum and end of story. What I didn't realize that this was just the beginning. It wasn't the end of our voyage. It was the beginning of the voyage that has lasted now, in 2016, will be 40 years, and has given birth to the Eala, the Hopu Alakai, the Makali'i, the Namahoe, the Ikianalia, the Hawaii Loa, the Eala, the Maulua, what else? The Mokiha. So, we never saw that one coming. We never imagined that. It was way beyond our dreams. We never thought that in the year 2015 we'd have all these canoes and Hokulea would be sailing around the world carrying a really important message. So again, this is Nainoa. These slides are just out of order. I'll just go through them. This is, we try to bring up young people all the time into that ohana va'a because we want to keep on sailing, and we know that the future of Hokulea lies in our youth. This is Mel Pa'oa with Tetua. This is Mel and Tetua. How's this one? And Rapa Nui, they said it couldn't be done, and it was done. They went there. And of course, they went to other places too. I think this is the Marquesas or Pitcairn. And we continue to teach what Hokulea has taught us. The lessons learned on the canoe, he va'a, he moku, he va'a. You can be, all the lessons you learn on the canoe can and should be applied to the way you live on the islands. And that's what we try to teach. And I don't know what the other islands do when we do cruise selection, but for Mel and I, we always try to choose people that we knew that would come home and do something with the lessons that they learned. And they wouldn't poho all that opportunity. We hope that the people that we send from Molokai will go, have a good time, enjoy the voyage, learn all the lessons, and then come home to Molokai and apply it to help make Molokai a better place. Hokulea sails with a message of sustainability and Malama Aina. And I think it's not just only about the Aina, but it's also about healing its people and the people all over the world. And we hope that in doing this, the canoe will make a difference, as it has done here for so many of us. And this is Kimo. And I think the guy to his right is Tiger Espero. Tiger was another one that stayed with us and helped us. I can remember riding a moped from Snug Harbor to the little Japanese store down the road to buy 1 5-pound box chicken with Tiger. And this is Keawanui Reiner in the blue shirt. Keawanui was a really good sailor. She's the other woman with me. There are just two of us in 76. She's a really good sailor. She had done a lot of transat voyages with her dad, races. And we lost her to cancer when both of us were in our 40s. So I like to remember her because, you know, everybody says, oh, you're the one that's still on Hokulea, you're the woman. I go, no, there were two of us. So you have to remember Keawanui. And that's my story. In recently, when one of the younger people came home, she was having a hard time adjusting, coming back to the land and being away from that whole ohana wa'a and being on the canoe. And so you go and you experience this big thing, and then you come back, and then it's like, how do I be like how I was before I left, you know? And so, and it was difficult. I think it is difficult to do something like that and then come back and have everybody treat you like you're still the same person, and you're expected to be the same person, but you're not. You've grown and you've experienced things that other people haven't, and it's weird, you know. It's hard to come back. So, but if you think about what you learned on the canoe, and you have that kuleana to not poho that, then it helps you to move forward. So I think my biggest takeaway from the canoe is that you know that you have that kuleana to not poho that opportunity that you had. And I think that's what helped me to move forward, because I knew that I was really lucky, like real lucky, to go, you know, like dog luck, man. Right place, right time, you know, met the right people. I just got to go, and I knew that. And so, and I didn't want to waste that. You know, like, well, she got to go, and I'll look at her, what's she doing, you know? So I think the biggest takeaway from my experience was having that kuleana, and that was able to move me forward and not poho the things that I learned. But there are other things that came close too. Like, there's so many good things. But I think that was one of the best things. It made me grow up and see Hawaii in a different light. Yeah, like I knew we lived in a special place. I didn't know how special. I knew we lived in a fragile place. I didn't know how fragile. And then I really realized how we have not been taking good care. So that was the biggest thing for me.